Hey there, friends. I often have people ask me, why do you have such a problem with the three-letter agencies, ATF, FBI, even EPA, and all the other ones out there? Well, I've got my reasons, and I'm going to tell you some of them. First, guys, I want to tell you about some friends of mine, X-Tech Tactical. I love these guys. They make a lot of aftermarket stuff for guns that you're probably not going to get in terms of quality with the OEM stuff that comes stock on these particular firearms. More specifically, the magazine selection that they have. They have upgraded magazines, much more durable magazines. In fact, functionally better magazines regarding springs and followers inside. You want to check these guys out. I'm a big fan of theirs. I'm a user of theirs. I'm one of their biggest customers. So check them out, X-Tech Tactical. First off, guys, change of scenery today. I'm in my backyard. We've got some rain on the way. The fact that the sun is covered up, and I'm so hopeful that fall is right around the corner and it's not 103 degrees out here today. Nice cloud cover, feels good back here. So I wanted to come to you guys from the backyard. Real quick, I wanted to point out, as I was setting up, some ants bit me. Did you guys know that when ants start to bite something and they feel like there is an intrusion on the nest or something like that, I guess the frontline ants, the ones that initially encounter you, release what they call an alarm pheromone. Those alarm pheromones cause all the other ants to come to where you are and attack, bite, sting, or whatever. So that's why whenever you get ants on you, it's not like one or two. All of a sudden it becomes a bunch and they all seem to be biting at the same time. A little bit of tidbit of information I thought you might like to leave this video with. However, the FBI. People ask me why I have a problem with the FBI. You know, I like to see the good in everybody, right? I really do. I honestly feel like people start out genuinely from a level of goodness. They either get better or they get worse. I feel like there are probably people that may have ego problems, probably some authoritarian problems, maybe even some bullying problems that they've dealt with in their past, and sometimes that pushes them to go in various fields, like law enforcement in some cases, like the FBI in some cases. In other words, they've been bullied and they had no authority and they were candy asses as they were going through school. They never stood up for themselves or anything, and now they feel the need to have a badge and a sense of authority in order to boss other people around and gain that upper hand, if you will, that they never took the initiative to have before. This makes it look even worse. You guys have probably already seen this, but there's a 3-page document that has been leaked by the FBI, or at least it came from the FBI, that shows what the updated level of threat is with the, quote, militia violent extremism movement out there. Let me explain a little bit of this to you, and if you've already seen this, I apologize, but this is worth going over. It starts out, militia violent extremism are anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists who seek to use or threaten force or violence to further their ideology in response to perceived abuses of power by the government, perceived bureaucratic incompetence, or perceived government overreach, especially in regard to suspected infringements on gun and land rights and excessive use of force by law enforcement. The phrase, "there's a lot to unpack here," hits me broadside as if it were a school bus. That one sentence was packed full of inaccuracies, suppositions, and bullcrap. Let me break it down. First of all, they gaslight to try to make it look like anybody who doesn't agree with them, look like them, sound like them, act like them, is now all of a sudden immediately in a militia, violent, extremist organization. They say that we are anti-government, anti-authority. If you are pro-government, pro-authority, you're a slave. They say we seek to use or threaten force or violence to further our ideology in response to perceived abuses of power. Let me stop it right there. They say we seek to use or threaten force. I don't really believe that most of you guys out there, including myself, look to threaten or seek to use force against any perception that we have about anything. I don't even think we threaten this. I think that we are emphatic about if you threaten my family, meaning the FBI or whomever else, if anyone threatens my family, and I know that I've done nothing wrong, and I know that my family has done nothing wrong, you will be met with force. I believe that's the message that's being sent out there. I don't hear anybody, at least, nobody that I follow or I listen to or that I know, put out videos talking about how they are threatening the federal government for any perception they might have, right or wrong. But they talk about our ideology in response to perceived abuses of power. Let me stop you right there. If an organization is profiling a person and they suspect that that person might be doing something wrong, in other words, they don't have an arrest warrant for that person. So they subpoena, or they get a search warrant rather, for their home. They go to their home, they put a piece of tape over the Ring doorbell, in essence hiding who they are so that the homeowner, who is not under arrest, and they are not there to search that person or to arrest that person. So they're trying to hide from that person who they are and what they're there for, and they're trying to hide any potential evidence that they may be creating during the process of this unannounced raid. That is not a perceived abuse of power by the government. That's a literal abuse of power and authority by the federal government. That is not perception. That is an absolute fact that happens. And not just once, not just twice, all the time. These people have made it part of their daily routine to do these types of things, to intimidate and bully people. So it's not a perception. You may view it as a perception because you don't want to think that you're doing something wrong, because you feel like the fact that you have a badge, you can go home, beat your chest, act like you're something to your wife or your boyfriend, more likely, and you can act like you are doing the work of the people. You are this noble person doing all this wonderful stuff for the federal government in the name of service to the people, right? Whatever, man. It's an abuse of power is what it is. I'm not perceiving that. I'm calling it that. Perceived bureaucratic incompetence. Y'all really want to talk about that? The example I just gave, right? The Secret Service, the FBI's covering of the Trump assassination attempt. Y'all really want to call it perceived bureaucratic incompetence? Do you really want to go there? My guess is this document was likely printed well before the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, because it is not, and even by their own admission, it is not a perceived bureaucratic incompetence. It is an absolute incompetence by those bureaucracies involved, the unelected bureaucracies involved. And then it says again, or perceived government overreach. Everything I just stated, everything. Remember, these are unelected people. These are people that nobody chose. No one chose these people. They were hired, and in some cases, they were hired against the wishes of the American people. I never gave anybody the okay to hire the darkest person, the fattest person, the most female person, the most feminine male person. I never approved that. I give my approval to hire the best person, not by your standards, by people's standards. We the people, the ones who are paying the bill. We're the ones who are okay with you hiring the best people based on our recommendations. But you guys have changed all of that. So now that's why we don't trust you. You don't seek out the best. You seek out the darkest, the fattest, the gayest. You realize every single thing in that first statement is their way of trying to deflect what they are actually doing. They would have done themselves a favor by not putting any of these adjectives in there. Because by doing that, they're pointing the finger back at themselves and they're saying all the things that you say we're doing, hey, we're really not doing that. You are calling yourself out subliminally and not even realizing that you're doing it. You are doing our work for us. We don't even have to do that. Using all these words as perceived, suspected. You could remove all of those words and this sentence would read as accurate as ever. Let me do that for you. I'm going to change the word militia, violent extremists to patriots. Patriots are anti-government, anti-authority, I think that's right, people who seek to use common sense in response to abuses of power by the government, bureaucratic incompetence, or government overreach, especially in regard to infringements on gun and land rights and excessive use of force by law enforcement. That sentence reads perfectly. And I have never seen a more accurate representation of a sentence. It's funny how the strategic placement of adjectives in a sentence somehow, if you perceive it right, changes the meaning of that one sentence, but you remove all of that fake adjective nonsense and you get the actual truth of the sentence. These people are calling themselves out. The next statement, it's untrue. They fear the government is unwilling or unable to protect the United States. No, I don't fear that. I don't fear that our federal government is unwilling or unable to protect the United States. I think they choose not to protect the United States. We are willing to protect our country. We don't need the government. That's the thing that they don't understand about conservatives. We're not calling 911. We're not begging the government to save us. We got this. So they fear the government is unwilling or unable to protect the United States from perceived threats from undocumented immigrants. Again, I don't think the government is unable to. The government doesn't want to protect our country against these undocumented illegal aliens. So there you go. We're not afraid of them. We just don't want the trouble of having to deal with them on our own because the federal government is unwilling to do that. And this is where the gaslighting really kind of pisses me off. They say that we believe that our actions are justified given our self-appointed role as protectors of the U.S. Constitution, a responsibility they perceive as consistent with a well-armed citizenry sanctioned by the Second Amendment. Well, that's not true. You see, you guys, the FBI, who put this letter out, you're who we expect. Now, we know better, but you're who we expect to protect the Constitution. You're not doing it. So rather than call 911 and rather than wait on somebody to come save us, we're just going to do it on our own. We don't expect you to do that. We know you've already given up and abandoned your responsibility there. So again, we got this. So I'm not going to break down their first paragraph anymore because it's really just a bunch of BS. I really want to move on to some of this other meat and potatoes that they have in here. You need to know what types of terms, based on our video that we had yesterday where we talked about social media being used against us, about how elected politicians and future politicians, if they are elected, do not believe in the expression of free speech or the exercising of the First Amendment. We talked about all of that. The thing to remember is the attack on the First Amendment, as well as identifying keywords that will flag you on social media when you use them, is extremely important. Whether it be hashtags, whether it be words you're using in titles of videos, whether it be text that you're putting in comments, all of these things are, there's input, and this is proof of it. There's input of various terms that will flag you as an individual, as somebody who might be one of these MVEs, as they call them, because you used a particular word. The very first term, and I find this so very comical, is killdozer. You guys remember the killdozer. This is the guy who welded together all these metal plates on this dozer, had a beef with people in this town, and then essentially destroyed the town for as long as it would go with his killdozer, which, by the way, I will post a link if you want to go get a really killer killdozer t-shirt. Go to TriStar. I have a link down below that you guys can follow. Don't forget to check that link. Click on that link down below in the description, and it's going to take you there to get you straight there to get that killdozer t-shirt, to enforce the fact that now you're probably on a list already. So go get a killdozer shirt to make absolutely sure you are on that list. Moving on, martial law. So if you have a fear, even after the COVID fake hoax, of even mentioning the term martial law, now you're going to be put on a list because somehow or another you think that's a perceived misuse of authority by these nutbags. Of course, Molon Lave, you can expect that. New World Order, boy, how weird is that? How weird is it that I put a video out yesterday on globalism, and now this term on a story I'm doing the very next day of New World Order pops up? The irony is not lost on me on this one. Oath breaker, of course, they hate that. They absolutely hate that. The FBI especially, because these are people who swore an oath. Members of Congress, Senate, President, law enforcement, all these people swore an oath. They are all oath breakers whenever they infringe upon our rights. They hate that term because it makes them sound disloyal, disingenuous, liars, and just people that you can't trust. All true. If these people are breaking the Constitution, they are oath breakers. So they put that in there so you'll stop using it, so you'll stop hurting their feelings. Patriot movement, I don't see why that's even in here, because now we see the people on the left, especially in the Kamala and Waltz movement, trying to act like and call themselves patriots. So kind of unusual that they use that term, because that's going to start to actually include a whole lot of different people. Prepping. I've always seen the prepping stuff. These people get a black eye for no reason. These are literally people. The word prepping was taken from preparation. This is a movement, and for the most part, I know there's some nutbags out there. There's a nutbag in every single following or section, right? They use this term to blackball people because they're preparing. Because they buy enough ammo, they buy enough food, they buy enough water. They get a generator. They find a way to purify their own water. They found a way to generate a little bit of electricity on their property. They are trying to make them less reliant on the government. Why does the government hate that? If you rely on the government for almost everything, you will not be able to provide much of anything. That means that you will always be relying on the government. The government wants you as much of a slave as they can make you. So the more free cheese and free stuff that you get from the government, the more control they have over you and your life. They don't like that. Red flag, boy, this one really kind of pissed me off. Red flag laws or extreme risk protection orders allow courts to issue orders temporarily confiscating firearms from individuals deemed to be a risk to themselves or others, typically at the petition of law enforcement or family members, but sometimes other individuals such as educators or health professionals. MVEs, that's supposed to be us, often regard such measures as unconstitutional and indicate they will respond violently if they or their companions are red flagged. Let me explain why this statement is incorrect. First of all, this shows what their motive is. This shows that they are mad because they are not able to just kick your door in at 2 a.m. in the morning and take all your guns from you. They're pissed off about that. They're pissed off that all states have not implemented a red flag gun law policy. Now, all red flag gun laws are unconstitutional. Let me get that out of the way. Put me on the list, I don't care. They imply here that, and they only state the one portion of it, that somebody can petition if they're a threat to themselves, a threat for their... You realize the word threat means that nothing has happened yet. But they see you as a threat. Let me use their word. They perceive you as a threat. You have done nothing wrong. You have broken no laws. You have hurt no one. But they perceive you as a threat to yourself or others. So they petition a court without you knowing about it, with zero due process. That's where the unconstitutional nature of this comes in. Then they go into your home, another breach of the Constitution. They take your firearms, another constitutional amendment, breach right there. They do all of these things. Then they tell you, oh, by the way, Paul, this is why we did that. You just violated 3 of my constitutional rights. And in your paper, the FBI is stating that this is a perceived thing that we have, that we somehow regard such measures as unconstitutional. We're not guessing that they're unconstitutional. We are stating the fact that based on the Constitution, they violate it. You can word salad all you want. It doesn't make it a fact. The Constitution is very, very specific and black and white on these items. You must include due process. And I don't mean due process. The way that they're getting around this is say, oh, our red flag gun law, it includes due process. You know why? Because they've heard us talk about due process. So they've made it a Part A and a Part B red flag gun law. They've said, oh, Part A includes due process. So if we perceive you as kind of a threat, we'll come to you. We'll petition the courts to call you in. We won't kick your door in yet. We will question you because you're not a super duper threat or a super duper perceived threat. So we'll question you. And then if we determine you're still that super duper, or now you're a super duper threat, then we'll take your guns from you. Oh, and there's a Part B. The Part B is if we think you're a super duper threat, we're not going to question you at all. We're going to kick the door in, take the guns, then we're going to take you into court and let you have your day to prove that you were innocent so you can get your guns back. You don't get them back until You prove that you're not a perceived threat. The burden of proof is on you to get your constitutionally protected items back from the government because they took them with no due process. So this is gaslighting. This is everything you ever wanted it to be. Putting red flag in here just shows their insecurities and knowing full well that they are overtly violating the Constitution when they execute a red flag order. Now, the 3%er, that's the other one that still kind of bothers me because they're lying in this thing. Again, I don't know if the wording in here, because this is not meant for us, by the way. Remember, this was not meant for public consumption. This was meant for the idiots inside the FBI. So I think they're trying to brainwash their own people with this wording. I don't think they're trying to convince us because, again, they didn't expect this to get out. But look at this next one. This makes me think that they're trying to convince their new cadets and people within the FBI to believe these things that they're true when they're actually not. 3% and 3%er refers to a militia movement based on the myth. This is where it gets crazy. Based on the myth that only 3% of Americans fought against the British during the American Revolutionary War. That's a lie. They're lying about this. It's not a myth. It's an actual fact. You may not like how they're using the words 3%er right now, but the statistical and mathematical fact, historical fact, that 3% of the American population at the time were the ones who took up arms and fought against the British in the Revolutionary War is an absolute and provable fact. So for them to call it a myth is an outright lie. So there again, it makes me wonder if they're trying to rewire some of their new cadets into thinking things that are not true. This is where it gets good. Go down to letter U, key terms. Look at the first one. Second Amendment, or 2A, refers to the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And then it spells out the constitutional words. MVEs, again, that's us, militia, violent extremists, and others within the militia movement often reference and interpret the Second Amendment to justify private militia activities and their opposition to gun laws. So they've taken the word Second Amendment and wrapped it with all this BS militia talk to somehow imply that anyone who speaks out against a Second Amendment infringement is somehow part of a violent militia group, right? An extremist. That's what they've done here. They are attempting to, with a broad brush, paint every single person who speaks out against infringements as somehow being in a violent militia group. That's insane. So if you are in favor of protecting a citizen's constitutional rights, somehow or another you're just immediately lumped into a category as violent militia, sign me up. If that's the case, sign me up. Because I'm not going to be quiet about the infringements that we continue to see out there on any of the amendments, not just the second, none of them. None of what your gaslighting is doing, none of your little threats and word games and word salad, tossing your own salad, is going to make me somehow look at this and go, oh, I better be quiet. I better stop using the words like Second Amendment, killdozer, martial law, patriot, oath breaker, prepping. I better stop using any of that because I don't want to get put into the wrong group. You know what? I will probably take every single one of these words and put them in the tagline for this video because I think this is bullcrap. And what we should do is we should start using these words more than ever and overwhelm their little search engine to where now they can't find whatever people supposedly that they're looking for. Here's another one, Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. Some MVEs believe under the guise of humanitarian projects, FEMA intends to gather Americans in concentration. Okay, look. No. Have you heard that? Has anyone heard that? Has anyone not on some kind of weird, stupid little dark website where like three guys hidden in a basement go that chat with one another, say anything about that? I've never seen any legitimate person who wasn't even a threat to anybody. I've never seen anybody make any kind of comment about FEMA locking us up in concentration camps. You know what I have seen? I have seen the actual proof of FEMA using federal emergency management money for hurricanes and natural disasters to fund little trans camps in Washington, D.C. to teach 10-year-olds that they may be trans. I've seen that. I've seen the proof of that. And that I have a problem with. Don't put your little FEMA camp off on me as the reason why I don't approve of the way FEMA is running their business. I'm a little more concerned with you using money that should go to cities like in Maui that got burnt to the ground, and you wouldn't give them any money, yet you can earmark $500,000 to a trans camp in Washington, D.C. to teach people how to prance around in women's clothes. That concerns me. Friends, as we roll into the election cycle, all of this is planned. All of this is a reason to make people who are aware of the Constitution and aware of what it meant, aware of the amendments out there and what they mean, aware of what infringements look like against various amendments. It's all meant to put us in a box. It's meant to shut us up. Those that won't shut up, it's meant to get a knock on the door. Don't be surprised if you get a knock on the door. I think a lot of people out there that make a lot of noise, like we do sometimes, they won't knock on our doors. They don't have the balls to do it. Because when they knock on our doors, first thing I'm doing is I'm firing up my camera, which is what everybody else should do. When somebody comes to your door unannounced and they start talking to you about the things on this list, the first thing you should do is have your phone with you. And I'm not talking about a hidden camera. I'm talking about put it in their face. If they have something to say, and if they're accurate, and if they're correct, they should have no reason to not want it said on video. Put the video in their face, record the entire conversation. Do not leave your house, stay in your house, let them stay outside the house and film that conversation. Let them know, I'm not okay with this. You can attempt to put me on a list, but I don't belong there. Just because you say I'm on a list doesn't mean I should be on there. You're making stuff up about me, and I would ask to see paperwork. Don't have a warrant? I'm not talking to you. Bye. Leave. But that's what their goal is. This is all to bully people. This is all to put somebody on a list, make you think that you're on a list, and somehow or another intimidate you to the point where you will shut up. To where when you see infringements on the internet, and you see a lot of them out there, when you see these types of infringements that you're too scared to speak up about them. You're too scared to contact a congressman or anybody else when you see these types of things. This is all a ploy to shut you up. My best advice to you is be as loud as possible.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. It's over.